Well, hey there, Marlene. Thanks for joining us here on the Making Math Moments That Matter podcast. We're pumped to talk to you. Hey, take a moment. Introduce yourself. Tell us where you're coming from.
Well, thank you for having me. I am in Central Ohio. I teach at New Albany Plain Local Schools in the primary building, which is a 1, 2, 3 building. And I am a math intervention specialist and a data coach. So I support all three grades with tier two supports, and then help with the building math data, helping teachers look at their data, how can they can use it, and making it meaningful to their kind of their daily work with kids.
Awesome. Awesome. That is great to hear. And my friend, everyone has an interesting math backstory. And usually people, when we say mathematics or math class, have a moment that pops into their mind that they remember, sometimes positive, sometimes negative. Sometimes it's maybe like, underwhelming. Who knows? But
Yeah.
when we say math class to you, Marlene, what is that math moment that pops into your mind?
Probably, I went to a very small Catholic school where there's like two classrooms for each grade level. Those probably don't even exist anymore. And so that was a very uninspiring time. Wasn't anything, we didn't have a lot of flair. There wasn't a lot of, but when I was a sophomore in high school, I had a geometry coach or teacher who was the wrestling coach. And he taught geometry like he was coaching wrestling. And it was like a lot of loud and a lot
What
of,
he
what are
body
you
he body
doing?
slam people?
Oh my gosh. And so, I mean, just remember being petrified to even say anything. My cousin happened to be in the class. She would cry like every other day.
Oh
Um,
man.
where like who's going to love math? And I think that's, when I go into my students, beginning of the year, I ask them, do you like math? And I tell their parents the first goal, if we get to the end of the year and all I can say is they like math now, then I'm happy. Because if
Mm,
you do not like it, it is not going to click. You're not going to want to spend time on it, and you're not going to have fun with it. So even though he
Right.
petrified everybody.
He petrified you into liking it. Tell me, tell me,
Exactly.
tell me
This is
more
what
about
not to do.
tell me more about the connection. Like that's being your math moment. Like you remember it being scary, but yet now you're a math interventionist teacher. So it's like, did it scare you into like being like, I have to always do so great in this subject? And it like all
You
of a
know,
sudden it's a career, or
yeah, when
were
I went
you
to college, I actually was an English minor. I actually had a concentration in English. I thought I'd be an English teacher, reading and writing. And then when I got my first job, I was at a private school where I taught split level classes. So I was teaching everything like a 3/4 split. I had a 7/8 split later in my career. And so I think getting exposure more to math and that and having to teach different grade levels within one period kind of opened my eyes. And then I stayed home with my kids for a while. And when I went back, my first job back into the district that I'm in now was in math intervention. And it just, those small group moments um, hit me hard. I thought, okay, I don't want to teach English. Who wants to grade all those writing assessments for one?
yeah.
But I think and then the small group piece of it really stuck with me. And even when I went back in the classroom, I always did math groups because I saw the just the overwhelming sort of meaning of being able to sit with kids right across from you and the stuff that you don't see
right?
unless you're watching them do math. And I
Mm,
think that really hit me when I was first in intervention is how much you miss in whole group instruction, or if the whole class is doing a practice together, you're not seeing those little nuances
Right.
that you can see when they're right there in front of you. And I think we're fighting in my building to get back to more time for math groups.
Right.
Ohio has passed a dyslexia law, so it's reading, reading, reading. We have a very intense program. We do bridges, and it's an intense,
Hmm.
time-consuming program. So we're really fighting to get that balance where we can get back to math groups because they're just so powerful.
Oh, I bet. I bet. And, something that you said that resonates and I think is really important for us to always remember, I'm trying to remember the book, and John, you might remember it. I know it's in our book list, and I can envision the cover of this book and the research around how many people could be in a group before you stop believing that what's being said is for you.
relevant
And I
to
think it
you.
was something like the number 7 comes to mind, that like
Yeah,
as the
Okay.
I
group
think you're right.
size goes beyond 6, then all of a sudden it's like the experiments they had done, the research they had done basically showed that as soon as you get to that group size and you start getting to, now imagine 30 kids in a
Yeah.
classroom, it's like the teacher's saying something, but it's not for me.
The
It's for
bystander
everybody
effect.
else. Like the chances are, like, I mean, that seems like a good assumption, right? As a
Correct.
human, you go, well, chances are, I mean, there's 30
I
of
know
us
how to do
here.
this.
It's
Right.
probably not for me. But when you're in that small group setting and you can have that eye contact and you have that, closeness, right? You're right there. It's not, a very far distance between the speaker and the receiver or the listener. And you just think about how impactful and how important that is, especially when we talk about our students in tier 2 and in tier 3, those students who may require, that extra repetition of hearing it again or saying it more slowly or seeing it written down in a different way. That is a really important thing. So it sounds like the work you're doing there is really important work, and it's great that you're advocating for it. So I'm wondering, it sounds like I heard a pebble already around, how do you find more time for that small group? But right now, if we were to kind of take out that magic wand and we were to say, what's that pebble that's kicking around in your math interventionist shoe that you wish that we could sort of pluck away and, get you over that next hurdle? What would you say that that struggle is right now?
Actually, what triggered it, I actually, in your last summit, Dr. Nikki Newton did a session on acceleration versus remediation. I ordered her book while I was watching the session.
Love it.
I actually she did a little short session this morning. I got to have some one-on-one time with her, so I was a little geeked out. But I think we've seen our student population change the last 5-10 years, where I'm in a very affluent community, but now we also have apartments propping up, or we've got 2 or 3 families moving into an apartment together just to be able to attend our schools, and they struggle. And we've got our EL population is exploding. We've got a lot of move-ins who, I mean, I will see 3rd graders who they're on their 4th school in 3rd grade, and you're like, how are you? You're getting all these different curriculums from all over the country, maybe
Right.
out of the country. They don't speak English. And my old model of, I told when my principal hired me, I will not do grade level curriculum. They've got to fill gaps first. They need those underlying skills. And as our population is changing, I'm seeing it's no longer helping them with their grade level content. And if anything, it's confusing them. They'll take the strategies I'm doing and kind of mix them a little bit with what their teacher's telling them. And they're just so confused.
They're just trying to like fit
Yeah.
things, and
And it's not
it's
working.
almost like it's not bridging that
Yes.
sort of
So
gap as you might have thought, eh?
Yeah.
So let me state what you just said, just so I think I heard it correctly, is that you focused on trying to fill gaps of students and help them figure out where are these gaps and try to help them along in their understanding, and they may be, let's say they are below grade level and they are still teaching, taking grade level content in their tier 1 class in instruction, and you're saying that the gaps you're trying to help fill is not helping them in that class. Is that the disconnect
Yes.
you're saying you're feeling right now?
Yeah. I just felt like we weren't seeing enough. The skills that I was tackling, they were growing a
Right.
ton, but we just weren't seeing the growth with the grade level material because it was so disjointed. I always tried to follow what the teachers were doing and maybe put it in my warm up. But my teaching partner and I have been just really seeing that we've got to put some time in to pay more attention to what, I can't be doing addition and subtraction when they're doing fractions.
Right.
The kids are like, denominator? No, we're doing. So I think just trying to make that,
And your
how do I
structure.
follow all the curriculum and make sure I'm matching what they're doing?
Right. So just so I have the structure as well, because there's different ways to do, in math interventionist teaching is that, they're going to tier 1 and then they're going to your class, and you have like a class set time that they're coming
Yeah.
to you. And then is that a big group, like a normal class size group, or is that smaller
No, it's
groups?
usually, we try to cap it at 5.
Okay.
I usually do about 10 groups a day, about a half an hour, and it's, max of 5 kids. I pull from probably 20 different classrooms throughout the day. So that makes it hard because they're all in different places in their curriculum. And if
Right.
I'm trying to think of ways that I can have them communicating with me of where are you at? What chapter are you on? What unit are you on? So I can try to tie it all together. But yeah, they come to my little office room for about a half hour at a time every
Right.
day.
So you're recognizing there's, this being the pebble, this is the pebble you currently have, but because you've recognized it, I'm sure you've done something to try to figure out how do I correct this or align these two things up that I'm seeing this disconnect. So tell us what have you done so far?
I mentioned like a lot of times I just try to make my warm up match with it. If I knew third grade was
Okay.
doing multiplications, I would do subitizing with multiplication patterns, or they maybe had to tell me how many groups did you see, how many circles were in each group, and let's get a multiplication sentence. Or Dr. Nikki she was big on the fraction images, getting kids to just talk about fractions, and because that's always I think one of our lowest scores on our third grade state testing. So I made, files of those and shared them with teachers, and I used those as warm-ups when they were in their fraction unit. But it still wasn't enough just to do it for that 5 or 10 minutes. It was still
Right.
too disconnected. And so,
Well,
yeah.
one of the things that is a struggle, and you already highlighted it, so I'm not informing you of this challenge, which is when we are working towards helping students, to remedy some of these challenges, what we are up against is, of course, with every passing grade and every, let's say, day that goes by that the student hasn't kind of been given what they need as the next step, there's a further and further sort of road to go, right? And ultimately, what I think can be a distraction for you, the intervention teacher who is there, and your goal is not for them to be able to, and at least this is in my opinion, that your goal is not to immediately be able to help them with today's math lesson at grade level.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, you were saying it seems like it's not helping them in either end. It is really for you to assess where they are as best you can, because again, that's very hard work to still do, but to be able to screen, and probably some sort of screener was used to get a sense of like, is there a challenge? Then we're going to get more specific with the diagnostic around certain concepts. And of course, keeping it to number sense and operation type work, I think is very, very helpful, at least as a start, in order to avoid trying to fix everything in all the different strands, all the different areas, and noting that your goal is to help them get a little better from where they are now in that particular area, which means in some ways, not saying that you completely ignore that, how they're doing and how that impacts them elsewhere. But what has to drive your work is the goals that you're setting for that student, with
growth.
that student, and ensuring that they're making more progress along that journey. Because what is really easy for us to do when we're in that tier 2, tier 3 sort of environment. Now, tier 2 is a little different because oftentimes it is related to current content, but let's say tier 3, for example, where a student has significant challenges, significant gaps, you're really trying to hyper focus on the task at hand with the time you have. And that's the hardest part for us as humans, is that we want more time. We want more progress. We want it to happen now. But the reality is that we can't get something, without the adequate amount of time and effort put in. And really, you have to be so extremely patient when you're doing that work, because you can't get 20 minutes of time, let's say, a day or a week or 3 times a week, and expect us to be able to make these massive leaps. Right? It's just not realistic. Especially when we're dealing with a student that has not, has not been able to sort of, keep with the curriculum grade level content all along, right? So they're falling further and further. So it is hard because in your mind, we want to solve all the world's problems.
Yeah.
But we really want to look at like what is reasonable. So I'm wondering, can we take maybe a deeper dive into, for the typical student who would be in this intervention type program, about how much time per week are you getting to work with a student, let's say, in general? I know it's probably
about probably 120, it's usually about 30 minutes a day. So the goal is 150. It's probably 25 minutes a day by the time we come in and chit chat and
build relationship.
The next group's always knocking on the door. I'm like, hang on, we're almost done.
Totally.
Right.
So now when you think about that though, and you go, okay, so 25 minutes is not a ton of time. Now, one thing I'm going to say is an advantage that not every school district has, not every intervention teacher has, is the ability to see a student every day. Is a massive benefit.
One year I was by myself for quite a while in a building of over 1,000 students. And I tried doing a look at the neediest kid that did 3 days, the other ones that did 2 days. Then, you'd miss a Monday and it was awful.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody grew.
I was just going to say, and
I was just like, I got to get my hands on more kids, but
you really can't. And that the idea of, we want equality is like what hits us, where like fairness, right? This idea of like everyone deserves this, every student deserves this, but then it gets so watered down in terms of the amount of opportunity that every student has that it really doesn't do a whole lot of anything. So finding ways to have more. So I'm happy with your model, the amount of time that you have. What would you say that, and I'm wondering, like, do you find that what you're working on with the student, do you find that you have a hard time not getting quote unquote distracted or maybe sidetracked as to what they might be working on in the classroom? And what I mean by that is, do you find that sometimes you might find yourself hopping around to different ideas because you're trying to accommodate the classroom?
Definitely. Sometimes the teachers will like put their most recent pre-test in my mailbox and I'm like, I don't want to see it because and it's that, again, it's that balance of my goal is always, okay, I kind of know what's going on in the classroom. Here are those, like achieve the core is my best friend, where those underlying skills that I know they probably are missing that are making this more difficult, and at least trying to tell the kids, this is how this connects to what you're doing. So they at least can start to, maybe see like this really does, even though it looks a little bit different than what you're doing, it is going to help you down the line. But they're in first, second grade, like, oh, okay. They're not old enough to kind of make that connection and follow that. But
and what, like, generally, like, would you say, like, think about sometimes I like to think like core values in a way, not like personal values, but it's like, what is it that we value as a teacher in the math content, like the way you're trying to get the students to utilize that math content. So if you think about, like, what does it look like when you're helping these students, and what do you really like, would you say the primary focus is during that 25 minutes on average? If you think about, like, it's almost like completing the phrase, like, I always make sure that I work on, and not necessarily a topic, but it's like, I always make sure that this is the focus of the work that I do. And this, in like, what would you say like that is?
I think it's building meaning and making sure that through, they got to be able to see it, touch it, manipulate it. Online manipulatives are not the same as people who are like, oh, you don't need, just use the ones online. Like, they have to be able to touch it and build meaning from it and have visuals to connect. I mean, math has got to be, you got to do it to be able to understand it, and not do it like, do 12 problems. I don't do any, if I pull out a worksheet, my kids are like, what's this? I hardly have pencils. We're all marker board right in the table, get out the Play-Doh, get out the blocks, and just try to always have them, can they get an image in their mind of what they're doing? Can they manipulate the math and become flexible with numbers? So it's really that understanding piece, I think, which is what a lot of parents fight me against. oh, why don't you just tell them to carry the one? And,
Right.
but before I get to that, they're building that and bundling those ones and shifting that 10 over. I'm like, I'm going to get there, but they
What
have
is
to know the why.
what does that look like? Like what tools are you using to do I'm showing them where the one is and I'm getting them to like shift these things. Like
Usually
tell
I
me.
prefer popsicle sticks because those are easy. Eventually we moved to the base. I don't like the base 10 materials at first because they're already connected. Oh,
Mhm.
here's a 10 stick. I use popsicle sticks and then I have hair ties and I
Yep.
make them pick it up and bundle it and move it over to the 10
There
Okay.
is a
in the beginning.
massive difference between groupable and
Mhm.
pre-grouped manipulatives when we're talking about place value. And
Yeah,
I just wanted to echo what you had said about the digital tools. Like
they're
digital
not the
tools can
same.
help you in some cases to show certain things that are hard to do with concrete.
Yeah,
But for students, especially students who are tier 2, tier 3 that are having struggles, most often, dare I
yeah,
say it, most often they're probably still at a concrete phase, like a
yeah,
physical concrete phase in their conceptual understanding in those concepts anyway.
yeah.
So it really is important. I that's a big win for anyone who's got students who are struggling with place value. Like base 10 blocks are still abstract
I mean,
for
even Unifix
students.
cubes. Yeah, the
Right.
Unifix cubes, you can take them apart, put them back together, move them, something that they have to themselves bundle. So they are
Totally.
getting that
You get
transition
that
and,
concept, I
Right.
do really like the wrapping though. They wrap it and it's
yeah.
like you've now
We'll
turned
take,
this
yeah, then we'll
into a
take
group
10
of 10.
tens. We'll take 10 tens and
Absolutely.
we'll wrap it so they can actually see then too the growth from that, the magnitude of the difference between a 1 and a 100 or a 1 and a
Right.
10. Because the base, we've got like the flat base 10 materials now, not even the little cube ones that come with our bridges program. So they're really, they weigh the same for the most part. The 1 and the 10, the hundreds doesn't, just you don't get that feel of the weight of the quantity and the magnitude of how much bigger a 1 or a 100 is. So it's
It
the
is
popsicle
so
sticks seem to be
key.
the easiest.
And I'm wondering from a content perspective, do you find that you're trying to assist in all kinds of different areas or is it mostly number and operations? What
Yeah,
does
it's
that look
mostly
like in
numbers.
some of
Yeah,
them?
I mean, geometry, place value, or not place value, geometry measurement. Like I don't even touch any of that. I know it's important, but when they're doing that type of work, I can keep, but I
Right.
like number sense and yeah, operations and problem solving.
I love it. Unless, and the only thing I would say is the caveat is if, let's say, it's an area problem and you're doing it to help with multiplication, because that's a great model, like,
Right.
Yes.
so it's like, if it's going to help with the building of the number sense, fluency, and flexibility, I'm
Yeah.
all for it. But it's like, I just wanted to make sure that that wasn't, one of your, what we'll call it, like, it's a distractor really, is
Right.
because we want them to be successful in all areas of mathematics. So sometimes we think, well, I got to do a little of this and I got to do a little of
Yeah.
that. But then again, it becomes this very
Watered
broad,
down.
very, yes. And,
Yeah.
so I think focusing in as you are is huge. And I guess I'm wondering is like, based on the time that you have, are you seeing some progress if you just look at the concepts that you're working on students on? Do you
Yeah,
feel like a
100%.
growth?
Yeah. We
And are you,
definitely
Well,
can
that's
see that growth, like when we progress monitor them, when we benchmark them, even on things like their map test, because I think the map test is a better picture than the state test, because that is starting them at their level,
sure.
where state test, you're taking the third grade test, but you might be working at a first or second grade level in math. You're
Totally.
right.
You
I
could
mean,
do intervention work for 2 years and they
yeah,
might not change their overall
right.
score on a grade level test if they are multiple grade levels
Yeah,
behind.
that's why I like
It's not going
math
to
because
show up
it's, yeah, it starts them at their
100%.
level. You can actually see the growth. So my kids do make tremendous growth, on math and such some of the benchmark assessments that are focused on what we're doing. So I think that, I mean, the manipulatives, it works. It's just then figuring out one, convincing teachers it works and getting out manipulatives more. It's hard for a whole group. That's when the virtual manipulatives maybe, or some of your kids are on virtual and some of your kids that need it have got the blocks out. But I think it's in encouraging teachers that it's worth that time to drag
Totally.
out those stinking blocks and put them in a big pile and do something with them.
So based on what I'm hearing, I'm hearing that there's a lot of really good things going on. So I
Mhm.
want to come back to, because this is very common when we say our pebble and then we dig deeper. And then what I'm hearing is your pebble. I wonder what's the real pebble then that you're, because what I heard you say is that based on how you are doing this work with your students and focusing on the growth that the direct impact that you can have in this room on this content and helping students along that journey, and you're actually seeing it in other assessments as well.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, what's your real pebble that you're kind of grappling with? Is it the fact that you just want it faster? You just want to see students successful quicker? Or is it something deeper that maybe?
I'm usually, let's see, there's the word usually, pretty patient and, trying to, but I do think there are times where I'm like, holy moly, we've been doing teen numbers for 2 weeks now, and I'm going to poke my eyeballs out and you don't have it, and making myself maybe move on for a bit. Like, again, my partner and I always like, when do we just go, okay, enough's enough, let's move on. And you do get stuck in that, like, no, I
Right.
am not leaving. We are going to build teen numbers until we're blue in the face because they don't get it yet. And having that, just giving myself permission to go, okay, I've done what I can now.
Right.
We got to move on. They just might not, they're not ready for it. And if I can build it for weeks in a row and they're not ready, and seeing that and giving myself permission to go, that's okay. Let's move on.
Right.
So yeah, that is hard because you're like,
So
no, they don't have it. I can't keep going.
so
Mm,
it's so what I
it's like
what
the
I just heard
finality of it.
what I just heard is your pebble is actually like giving yourself permission that you are doing everything, in a really effective way, and we would
Yeah.
agree. And that sometimes we just have to say like, I need to not like put any more fault on what's happening here. I know that
Yeah.
this is working, and it's just like not working to a standard that someone else has set that we're trying to get these kids to. And it's like
Yeah.
the
Right.
only thing I can think of is like, because it sounds like you're doing all the right things in the right ways. You're using models, you're using strategies, you're focusing on the number sense and not jumping around as much as say someone else might be. The only thing that is like, how much alignment is happening between you and the classroom teacher
Right.
around those same models and strategies? Because what's happening, right, is like if the teacher doesn't value or understand the models, the
Understand.
strategies that you're using,
Yeah.
and then they're seeing that actually, because let's say you're pairing your strategy selection, like if you think about a unit that you're helping a student through, and you're going, what is the underlying model that's really effective, and the strategies on that unit for this unit, and you're every day you're doing 25 minutes on different strategies that can help them proceed through that unit to kind of build their number sense required to be successful in those areas. And it's really the same realm as with the units happening in the classroom. And it's kind of like, but if the teacher, let's say a teacher doesn't like, I'm sure
Well, you
you've
can't
run it.
assume everybody's a math nerd and
Right.
they see it the way I see it, or they
Right.
understand it the way I
Like
understand
they might
it.
not like we brought this up on the last podcast too, is that sometimes this happens when a teacher doesn't know about models and strategies, and they
Hmm.
can't, when they look at the solution and they're like, that's not what I was going, like that's not what I made as the solution. And then it's like they can't, if they don't understand how it's connected, they might mark it wrong,
Yeah.
So my wonder is, maybe this is your next step, is to go, I'm doing everything here to build the right number sense, the right models and strategies. Can I, in some fashion, try to make that more of an alignment with what's happening in the tier one instruction, so that there's like that blend between
Yep.
what's happening with you and what's happening with there. And I know you mentioned something about like trying to get the manipulatives out in the room.
Yeah.
Um, but it's like nuggets of information. Like I think it's like it's a long journey to like try to help educator make those connections.
When I'm teaching
But
all day and I don't have time
right,
to meet with them.
right. But it's like, yeah, where does that alignment happen, and
Yeah.
where's the school's priority on trying to align what's happening here? Because we would say we need alignment happen to go from your level up instead of
Yeah.
from top level down, right? So because you're working on, models and strategies that have proven to be effective for students to learn and not go straight to the algorithm. So
Mhm.
so maybe your next steps are to try to see how much alignment could happen or spill over into, or like, get students to bring those tests after so that you can look at and go, well, maybe like this was marked like you
Yeah.
showed this way, but this is actually really great thinking, like giving kids the feedback that they need and trying some way to make more of an alignment between you and the teacher.
Yeah. And I have been fortunate. On Fridays, we do something called bite-sized PD, like optional Friday morning PDs. And I um, do a lot of those sessions on things like multisensory math and, different strategies and warm-ups that they can use. And towards the end of the year, I noticed Bridges does this bizarre kind of break apart to add strategy for larger numbers. And my students who try to use it, their lines are all crossing and it doesn't work for subtraction with regrouping. So I taught them a different way to do it using expanded form and adding it that way. And then I went to team meetings and said, I really think we need to get rid of this break apart with all the little carrots up and down and trees everywhere. And can we try this strat? Because it's going to work for everybody. It's, sometimes it's good for everybody,
Right.
even if it only works for my little kids and that are working with me, it's still going to work for those
Mm-hmm.
average students and they're going to build meaning. So that's something that, like, just towards the end of the year, I'm like, you know what, next year, I think we need to scrap that strategy, replace it with this strategy. I told the third grade teachers the same thing, just to kind of try to see if we can get if there's a better way to do it. You don't necessarily need, well, the book's telling me to do it this way. Well, if you're seeing those
Right.
ramifications down the line that it's not effective, we have to have enough guts to
Well,
go, I don't know, the book is, we got to change it
yeah,
and
well, you
try
know
this
what?
strategy.
At least worth a discussion, I think, and maybe this is more of like an in between. Maybe people might be open to it. Is, first and foremost, I think having multiple strategies is helpful because then some students can maybe grasp one to start, and maybe, we want them to have some flexibility with the strategy. So I wonder if it's like, if say that strategy is falling apart at some point,
Mm-hmm.
why and where, and like, is there something that maybe we could do? Because while I don't know this, and we would have to, dig deeper here, but for example, if a teacher says, well, the book's telling me to do it that way, my first concern is, are they trying to mimic a strategy and they're not even flexible with the strategy themselves? And if that's
Yeah.
the case, then it's actually not going to be helpful, because you're going to try to get kids to proceduralize what is a strategy. And strategies are really supposed to be there to kind of take them out when they make sense. And some
Right.
strategies lend themselves to certain situations really easily. Like, so for example, in number talks, you'll find that compensation is one of these strategies that comes up early and it comes up often. But what you're going to notice is that a lot of students will rely only on that strategy. And when you get into other situations, sometimes compensation is not that helpful,
Yeah.
and that a different strategy is actually more helpful. And that's kind of the whole purpose of that fluency and flexibility. So I wonder if that could be maybe a start, is trying to figure out, well, if students are struggling with this strategy at certain points, like, why is that? Like, why do we think that is?
Yeah.
Maybe we need to, as a team, we need to better understand the strategy ourselves. And then here's this other strategy, and maybe some of the learning we can do as educators, we can go, when does this strategy seem to make more sense? And when does this one maybe seem to make more sense, or be more, we'll call it efficient, if we use
Yeah.
that word,
Yeah.
right? So those are some maybe thoughts there, because what I try to at least nudge people away from doing is trying to pick a strategy and then kind of going all in on it,
Yeah.
for everyone. Now, I understand in tier 2 and 3, you're not going to be able to get your tier 2 and 3 students to know
Yeah.
4 different strategies. That's not the goal. Is we want to help them get
Right.
a strategy. But for
Yeah.
students in tier 1, we don't want it to be like an all in or an all out on a strategy, but we do need to figure out like, where's it falling apart? And if we're
Yeah.
only teaching one in tier 1, then that's problematic in and of actually,
100%.
that could be sending more students to a tier 2
Yeah.
or tier 3 if
Yeah.
they aren't,
Getting that
finding use or
one. Yeah.
making use of that one strategy. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering, we chatted a lot about, a few things that were on your mind. And as John said, I want to reiterate, it sounds like you've got a lot of really good things going on. And one thought I have is the work that you're doing with your students is like really being aware of what's happening everywhere is important, but then not allowing it to impact what you know is right.
Yeah.
Right. What you need to do for that student at that time. And I think sometimes just hearing that from other people, and it might be relying on a colleague you trust to have this conversation with, can go far. Because if you are trying to be all things to all people, I'm trying to help this
Yeah.
teacher get through that concept with these students, and now we're jumping around and we're actually being less effective. So it sounds like you've got the right goals and you've got the right mindset. And I'm wondering if like just having that accountability partner to kind of remind you, when you
Yeah.
start to doubt yourself or start to doubt the strategy in terms of your approach on what you're teaching, that could be a really big, sort of help to keep you on track and do the work that you can do. And, unfortunately, being patient is really hard. And you have to remind yourself, people have to remind you that,
Yeah.
no one, I've never seen, let's put it this way, I've never seen a student in tier 2 or tier 3 that like everything was fixed
Yeah.
within a year. And actually, very rarely do you ever see a student go through the entire program over multiple years where suddenly they're just like right back on track. Like
Right.
it's going to be a long-term challenge for those students, given whatever the situation is, why they're
Yeah.
there, or what happened. So give yourself that grace.
Yeah.
And, with this, I'm wondering, I want to flip it back to you. What would you say is maybe your big takeaway from today, or something that you're going to think on a little more as you kind of continue doing this work and try to continue being the best version of your interventionist self that you can be?
Yeah, I think I really do. And my principal has told me this before. I try to be the building math coach because I'm sort of like all the kids. Oh, that's the math lady. She's the math lady. And I think I really have to stay in my 20 square feet more and not. I'm like, God, well, that class has got those 2 kids that were on the bubble. We didn't pick them up. I need to track their data and check with their teacher, or this teacher I see is using manipulatives way too long. Sometimes I do need to put my blinders on and go, I am not a math coach. I love helping teachers. I love doing PD with them, but sometimes I have to just kind of block that out and worry about my 20 square feet, my 50 kids that I work with. And then maybe if a teacher comes to me, I'm looking for, what do you need help with? What do you need help with? Wait and sit back. And if somebody comes to me and they need support, maybe provide it then, so that I'm not driving myself crazy trying to fix the world of math in my building.
Would you say that's your a big takeaway from today, realizing that, or is there another,
Yeah.
a big
Yeah.
realization today?
100%. Yeah. I'm being told, again, my principal's like, you're trying to do too much. You're not the math coach. I'm like, I know, but we don't have one. It's just press pause. So yeah.
The only thing I'm gonna encourage you to do, because I think what you're saying is, you had mentioned like trying to stay in your 20 square foot spot, and that's a good way to not get distracted. But I would argue that something that would be better for everyone, including you, is doing what you're doing, getting out of there and being that positive math person in the building.
Yeah.
But when you get back to business to do the work that you are supposed to do, and you get back into that seat, maybe having a message somewhere, if it's on your desk, if it's in your planner, something that when you sit down, you get in the habit, you sit down in this desk and you remind yourself of what you
20
are
square
there to
feet.
do in that 20 square feet. But
Yeah.
I wouldn't say staying in there all day is, what you want to do, because guess what? you're probably having a massive impact, even just being out in the building
Yeah.
and sort of sharing the math love, and people
Yeah.
calling you the math lady and people seeing you that way. Like that's a really good thing. And it's hard to measure what that might be doing in your building. But I think taking you and then keeping you in your box to try to keep you focused, I'm like, there's got to be a better way where you can do both. But still, when you sit down at that desk, that you go, okay, a reminder. It could be a one-liner of what am I here to do? Or maybe it's on a strip of paper and you tape it to the side of the desk that's facing towards you. So when you sit down with the students, you see that message. What's that message going to say to you as to what your goal is with those kids there? And that way you don't have to necessarily become the math hermit either, because we don't want to see you doing that.
Yeah, that would drive me crazy too, because I figured I mean, if you help teachers, you're helping. If I can support one teacher, I'm supporting 25 kids that maybe I don't get to work with. So I think that's always my if I can help them, they can help their kids, and then by virtue, I'm helping everybody.
Absolutely.
I just need more time in the day. Not that I want to be at work any longer, but
Marlene, we want to thank you for chatting with us here today.
thank you. It was enjoyable. I appreciate it.
We always want to check in. So, hopefully we can reconnect in, sometime next year, next school year.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
And see if that pebble's kind of shaken sideways, maybe like smaller.
Same
and I'm
pebble
sure,
instead of a
I'm
rock
sure,
pebble.
yeah, and I'm sure another one will get in there and
Hey,
rattle around. So
that's teaching.
we'll talk about it then too. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.